this one, no. This one was someone suggested it on my like extra channel that I watched a video about this, I think. The Yultong battle. So this is how these brave Filipinos somehow beat 40-1 odds in the Battle of Yultong during the Korean War by the front. Okay.
Time and time again, history proves that warfare isn't entirely a numbers game. And one of the best examples of this rule in action took place during the Korean War, when a small Filipino force held their ground against a far larger Chinese division.
Then the
While
Koreans started
numbers
playing
were
victim.
almost certainly blown out of proportion for the purposes of propaganda, some of the more conservative estimates still speak of victory against all odds. In this video, we pay our respects to...
I've been watching, for like a year now, the Korean War series by Indy Neidell and the Time Ghost Army. That goes into like every week what happened during the Korean War. And there was quite a few incidents like that, because, the North Korean and Chinese troops were like not the best, right? So there was a ton of like very small, American, French, or even Filipino units holding like crazy amount of, communist troop, because again, they weren't like the best at like strategy in terms of training and everything. So like there was a lot of like, thermopylae kind of situation.
the 900 brave Filipinos who fought in the highly exalted Battle of Yultong or Yuldong.
Interesting. Filipino mention. I know the name, but it's the first time I see someone do it in the chat.
Before we get stuck into the Battle of Yultong, just what were the Filipinos and Chinese doing in Korea anyway? Well, the Korean War was one of the bloodiest wars of the Cold War era. At the end of the Second World War, Korea was essentially divided into two halves. The Soviet Union administered north half and the United States administered south half. Both Korean governments were certain that they, and not their north or south counterpart, were in charge of the country, however, and on the 25th of June 1950, the North Korean People's Army marched into South Korea. In response, the United Nations started deploying its forces, with 21 UN member countries ultimately answering the call. The Philippines was one of such countries, deploying the Philippine Expeditionary Force to Korea, or PEF-TOK, in August that same year. PEF-TOK entered Korea at a strength of 1,486, but it grew to include some 7,500 during the conflict. One of the units under PEF-TOK was the 10th Battalion Combat Team, or simply the 10th BCT, which we'll get to soon. Sharing a border with Korea and maintaining different ideologies to the Western Bloc, it's no wonder that China watched the Korean War with weary eyes. In the words of Chinese Premier Zhao Enlai, directed at the UN, Korea is China's neighbor. The Chinese people cannot help but be concerned with a solution to the Korean question.
I mean, that's not really, it's just that, North Korea communist, China communist, so, that's why he wants to help them take over, obviously.
When UN forces invaded North Korea in October, China mustered the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, or PVA, crossed the Yangtze River in North Korea and startled the UN forces positioned there into a hasty retreat. This was the first of the PVA's 5 major offensives in the Korean War, with their last being the 5th Phase Offensive or Spring Offensive, during which they messed with the wrong group of fighting Filipinos. In the lead up to the Battle of Yultong, the aforementioned 10th BCT was attached to the US 3rd Infantry Division. North of the South Korean county of Yeoncheon and just east of Imchin River, the 3rd US Infantry Division deployed the attached US 65th Infantry Regiment, the Filipino 10th BCT, and the Turkish Brigade to stop 3 advancing Chinese Army corps. The Americans set up on a north to south front parallel to the Imjin River, while the Filipinos watched the 65th's northeast flank. The Turks held a broad west to east front just east of the 10th
Socialistic
BCT.
leadership.
It began at 8 PM on the 22nd of April 1951.
I mean,
an artillery barrage lit
at
up
least South
the
Korea
night
wasn't
sky,
great, but
landing on the
it was still
Turkish
better than
brigade and blowing
North
them
Korea.
to shreds. Some 4 hours later, artillery and mortar shells pummeled the entire 3rd Infantry Division front, paving the way for machine gun and small arms fire. Now, falling upon the 10th BCT was an entire PVN division, either the 34th Division of the 12th Army, according to the UN, or the 44th Division of the 15th Army, according to the Chinese. Either way, the division was at least 10,000 troops strong, with propaganda estimates reaching as high as 40,000. What ensued was a series of close-quarter engagements in which the Filipino 10th BCT managed to hold its ground. The Americans and Turks, however, couldn't handle the heat and retreated several hundred meters south, leaving the 10th BCT standing like a lone island in a relentless Red Sea.
Oh boy.
Stranded and severely outnumbered, the 10th BCT put its foot down and decided it would stop the Chinese advance then and there, or die trying. Either way, they gave the PVN division a fight that China will never forget. Filipino drivers, medics, clerks, typists, cooks, and even the unit's chaplain took up arms and threw themselves into the battle, which raged in pockets throughout the 10th BCT's position. In the words of fighting Filipino Luminoso Cruz, "The Chinese attacked us in waves all night. My buddy and I just kept firing and firing our rifles." Slowly but surely, however, the PVN attack eroded the 10th BCT's position, and most of the unit complied with an order to fall back to a secondary line. Most. But for the 10th BCT's tank company, this wasn't an option. Under the command of Filipino Captain Conrado Yap, the company drove toward a hill captured by the PVN, where the company aimed to rescue as many Filipino survivors and recover as many dead Filipino bodies as they could. To this end, the company succeeded, saving the lives of an incredibly grateful 10th BCT squad.
Very nice.
For his bravery, however, Captain Yap himself paid the ultimate price, receiving his Philippine Armed Forces Medal of Valor posthumously.
RIP.
The citation read, "Captain Yap, in a desperate effort to rescue the lost unit, ordered for covering support from the other units under his command and personally led a furious counterattack to regain the hill position and rescue the trapped unit, despite an authority that he may withdraw, which he has already received." He then proceeded to assault an enemy emplacement about 300 yards away, despite the hail of enemy fires, until he fell dead from an enemy bullet. Captain Yap also received the United States Distinguished Service Cross, with the citation reading, "He fearlessly led a daring charge to reach the beleaguered platoon. Under heavy fire received from flanks, they relentlessly pressed the assault, regained the hill, evacuated the casualties, and rescued the isolated unit." Observing a stricken soldier on the slope of the hill, Captain Yap immediately started toward the man, but was mortally wounded by a burst of enemy fire. Inspired by his heroic conduct, his men continued the fight with such determination and skill that the enemy attack was contained and numerous casualties were inflicted. By dawn, the 10th BCT had scarcely given any ground to the Chinese division, and in covering the 3rd Infantry Division's retreat, the Filipinos had utterly exhausted their enemy, whose offensive was growing weaker by the second. Tireless, the 10th BCT then launched a counterattack, pushing the Chinese back a few places on the board and putting an end to the Battle of Yultong. While the Filipino 10th BCT suffered 56 casualties in total, these fearless soldiers, cooks and chaplains, and whoever else was able to pick up a gun, managed to kill more than 500 Chinese troops throughout the battle.
That's crazy.
It's safe to say that the Filipinos proved themselves a force to be reckoned with over those 2 days in April 1951. But maybe this was better expressed in the words of Filipino Major Maximo Young, who was actually there. The Battle of Yultong was the greatest Filipino victory in the Korean War. It was one of many battles fought by the United Nations Command in an effort to repel the biggest offensive of the Korean War, the Communists' Great Spring Offensive. By 6 a.m. of the 23rd of April, the 10th BCT was one of only 2 UNC units on the Western Front not overran or wiped out by the tremendous Chinese assault. Pef Talk, to me, is the embodiment of Filipino patriotism. But what do you guys think? Had you heard about the Battle of Yultong before this?
Nope.
Did the 10th BCT really face off against as many as 40,000 Chinese troops, or was that just propaganda? Lastly, would you ever
I don't know. Is there a source? How do I know?
read when American General Douglas MacArthur said, "Give me 10,000 Filipino soldiers and I will conquer the world"? Please share your thoughts in
I mean, it's a nice quote, but MacArthur said it.
the comments section below. And just before you go, guys, if you want access to exclusive rewards, videos, and
Okay, al plaisir. Very good. I mean, again, you know, like the guy is saying he's not even sure if this actually happened. Like, is there no source that they actually faced that many? I mean, I believe it. It's totally possible, right? There's many stories like that in World War II. You know, of like super tiny force holding crazy numbers, because with modern war and like modern machine guns and stuff like that, it just works, right? I mean, when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, you know, the Polish resistance, there was like a famous place where like there was only 1,000 Polish soldiers that had just a few bunkers to hold the German from crossing a bridge around like a big river, right? And it was like 1,000 Polish soldiers versus about 40,000 German soldiers. But again, because of the way the terrain was made, the placement of like the bunkers, it made it that the infantry couldn't get close without getting killed by the machine gun, but the tanks couldn't really like cross the water or anything. So it was like you know, that kind of weird stalemate. So yeah, there's a lot of stories like this. So you know, I believe it. I mean, I don't have the source, but I believe it's very nice from the Filipinos. Good video is the link. Okay.